Howdy, folks. My name is Ben Franklin, aka Yellowstone Ben the Chess Bear. Now, today we're going to look at basic strategy. This is intended for new players. I'm going to pass you over to my assistant, Robin, who will lead you through some basic strategy. Take it away, Robin.
Thanks, Ben. So today's course is Basic Chess Strategy for Beginners. We'll be covering the following topics. What is the game about? Occupying the center, developing your pieces, protecting the king, and how to attack. So lots of ground to cover. Let's make a start. So what is the game about? Well, the game started as a military strategy game, and I think that analogy still holds good. You have two armies, the white army and the black army, and the objective is to take your opponent's king. Now, one important thing to understand is that any of your pieces can take any of your opponent's pieces if they are within sight. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's just make a few moves. Okay, and let's pull it down there. Okay, so now it's white to move, and at this stage, there's a few things to understand. This white pawn has sight of this black pawn, so the white pawn could take this black pawn. That's one option. Also, this white knight has sight of the same black pawn, so the white knight could also take the black pawn because it's in sight. Now, why wouldn't the white knight take the pawn? Well, because immediately following that, because these pawns are protected, there is a line of protection here, and so if you take, let's take black pawn, then the following go, it's very likely that black will take the knight. So the whites have lost a knight of value 3 points. Black has lost a pawn value 1 point. So you might think that black are better off from that transaction. Okay, so so this analogy of what can be seen, let's move this bishop here. Now, this bishop can now see this pawn and can potentially take it. Now, if, for example, if black were to move a pawn here, the pawn is now threatening the bishop, but this pawn is unprotected, and it's known as a hanging pawn. This pawn also is unprotected and is also hanging because there's no protection there. White could choose to take this pawn, and there's no threat, there's no protection there, so black would have to do something else. So it may well move this pawn forward. So now, in this situation, we have black threatening the white bishop. Other considerations, black is threatening this pawn, and the black knight is threatening this white pawn. So lots of things going on, but it's white to go. So white will very likely withdraw this bishop somewhere else for the moment, and that takes it out of danger. So in this position now, it's black to go. So again, there are these threats at the moment. Black could consider taking this pawn. Black could consider taking this pawn. But this knight could take this pawn here because this white pawn is unprotected. And there's also, it just leads on to another threat for this white's weak pawn here. So these are things to consider. So now, at the moment, there is only one piece threatening this white pawn. So if black were to take it, the king could take the knight. So it's possibly not a threat at the moment, but it could become one. So these are all things to think about. Okay, I hope that principle is clear. Let's move on to occupying the center. Well, I would say the center of the chessboard are these 16 squares in the center of the board. So how do you occupy the center? Well, I think if you may wonder how to start, perhaps. Well, white takes the first move, and I think it's a good idea if you can push your king or queen pawn out by two squares, and I'll just demonstrate why that should be. So in this situation, these front two pawns will control these four squares here, and that is quite a restriction to the black pieces. Now, of course, black may choose to take the white pawn, but in general, if you can control these central squares, that's a good thing. Let's now look at some of these so-called minor pieces. This knight here on the back row, at the moment it controls only these three squares in this position. But if we now move this knight to this more central position, well, it now controls up to, oops, not that one, sorry. It now controls up to 8 squares. So the white knight has far more influence if it's in a central position. And that also is the case for the bishops. So if I move this bishop, at the moment in this position, the bishop controls 6 squares on this diagonal. But if we move this bishop to this more central area, well, now it controls 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, it now controls up to 10 squares, so it has far more influence in this central position. Okay, the next subject I want to look at is developing your pieces. And all this means is pulling out your bishops and your knights into the field of play. So at the moment we have one bishop and a knight developed, but this bishop does have a clear line of sight, so that's pretty good. But we would certainly want to pull out this white knight pretty soon, I would say. So let's just continue with this. So looking at black's position, black has two knights developed. Its bishop here has a clear line of sight along this diagonal, which is good. But this bishop here is really blocked in. It's not doing much at all. And so either black needs to, let's just, so either black needs to pull this pawn forward, giving this line of sight along here, or it could possibly move this pawn out of the way as an alternative. Okay, so in this situation, the white bishop is being threatened by the black pawn, but the black pawn is protected by two pieces, the queen and the knight, but it's threatened by three pieces, the bishop, the knight, and the pawn. So in this situation, if I were playing white, I probably would take the black pawn because I should come out better overall in the end. That's the sort of the thinking behind it. Okay, so next to go is black. So really the last thing I would want to do is to move this white knight out from the back line, and so I'd probably move it here. And at this point, my knights and bishops are pretty well developed. You know, arguably I could move this bishop out somewhere. Let's perhaps move it. I mean, it does have quite a nice line of sight there. So I think this sort of rather neatly leads on to the next subject, which is protecting your king. And the king at the moment is located in this central location, and it is regarded as better if you can protect the king. And the way to do that is by a process known as castling. And that's where you exchange the position of your king and your rook. And so if I demonstrate that, move the king to this position, and you'll see that the rook jumps over, and now you'll see that the king is behind this shield of pawns. But there is a secondary advantage to castling, and that is releasing this rook to use subsequently in any offence. So let's see how that might work. So let's, for example, let's just move this here. And white might then choose to move their rook over here. Now you'll see that this is quite a nice, this gives, possibly quite a strategically important move for the rook, because the rook is on the same file as the black king. Okay, so that's castling. You can castle both on the king's side and on the queen's side, and I'll just demonstrate that. So let's just rewind. So if I move the white queen out of the way, I'll just make let's move that to there, that to there. Okay, so it's white to play. Now white can castle on the queen's side. So the king would move here, and again the white rook jumps to this, again, central location, and so the white king still has the protection of this pawn shield with the addition of this bishop. And you'll notice that the king is still vulnerable on this back line. If ever you get an opposition queen or rook on this back line, it is vulnerable to checkmate. But what we have here are two rooks guarding this back line, and the rooks are connected. And what that means is they can see each other. So if one of the rooks is taken by an opposition piece somehow, well, then the other rook can replace it as protector. So, and that's quite good protection for the king. Okay, so I hope that's clear. The final subject I want to look at is how to mount an attack. So let's rewind to the opening screen. So the way that you win a game of chess is by getting your opponent into checkmate. And this can happen quite quickly, although often it will take a lot longer. So I'll just show how that might be achieved. So the game may well open like this. White may bring their bishop out. Now, there is what's known as a weak pawn on this front line, and the weak pawn is this one here. And on white's side, the weak pawn will be here. Now, this pawn is only protected by the king, and so it is often targeted for that reason. And you'll see that this white bishop is now targeting this pawn, but it can't do it on its own. It needs some support. And so let's just let's move that out. And so what white might do is to pull out their queen to this position. And now you'll see that both of these pieces are targeting the weak pawn. Now, if black doesn't see this, then next move will be checkmate. So, for example, if black simply moves a pawn up, then white could take this black pawn and it will be game over. It's checkmate. Because the black king cannot take the queen because the queen is protected by the bishop. Now, this is just one example of checkmate. There are lots of other ways of achieving checkmate, although, as I say, it is likely you'll need to use at least two pieces to achieve this end result. Anyway, I hope this was useful to you. Please leave any feedback in the notes below, and I'll hand you back to Ben.
Thanks, Robin. Sounds like good advice. The best way of learning is by playing, and you can play against the computer for as long as you like at solitaire-club.com. There are 3 skill levels to try. If this video was helpful, please click the like and subscribe. Bye for now.